That upon returning, Alistair Overeem is going to face the winner of Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez. Nick Diaz, once his suspension is up in February, he will not get an immediate title shot. Of course, a lot can change between now and then, but that's what he put out there. I think it would be a mammoth mistake on the UFC's part, especially if GSP wins. I would rather see Nick Diaz versus GSP than GSP versus Anderson. And I think if Nick doesn't get an immediate title shot, considering his popularity, considering how he will act upon his return, I think you can make a case for Nick getting a title shot makes a lot more sense, is a lot more fair than Alistair getting an immediate title shot. What do you think of that decision on the UFC's part?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to sort of skin this cat and address it. You know, the obvious challenge to your point, not the one I'm going to make, but someone would say is, well, listen, Alistair beat Brock and Nick Diaz lost to Carlos Condit, and that's sort of that.
Controversial loss, but...
Admittedly, right. Yeah. Although nothing controversial about what Alistair did to Brock. You know, listen, it's a tough call. Diaz to me is kind of interesting. And the reason why is because two things about him are kind of funny. He doesn't have the mic skills that Ronda Rousey or Chael Sonnen have, right? But he has this organic appeal because of his essence and the way he fights. The other thing that's interesting to me about Nick Diaz, and correct me if I'm wrong, he has never pulled out of a fight due to injury. He's missed weight here and there. He has missed weight there and there, but Elite XC
he's just not shown up. There's that.
The Jay Haran situation where he didn't.
Sure, but I mean,
kind of worse.
Well, here's what I mean. Given a big opportunity, and we'll see. But given a big opportunity, injury has never plagued him or his brother. I don't think Nate Diaz has ever pulled out of a fight due to injury either. In other words, he's a consistent, reliable talent in that sense. To me, there is something to be said for that. I don't know if I give him an immediate title shot simply because of the Condit fight. I did have Condit winning that fight. I know it's debatable.
Sure.
But what I would say is, if you put him against somebody who might wrestle him to death, you know, who isn't a contender, like if you put him against Koscheck, I don't really find that to be an appropriate use of his talent. And with Overeem, you know, Overeem could be the next big heavyweight star in MMA, so I think there is some case to be made for ushering him in. Although, also, I could entertain the argument that Cormier deserves something of that kind of treatment.
I'm transfixed as anybody by Nick Diaz, but he's one of the least reliable guys in the entire sport. I mean, maybe not in terms of injuries, but I mean, the guy has straight not shown up and caused a complete wholesale cancellation. It's really the reason Carlos Condit is even in this conversation. It's because he's the guy that got plugged into the mess that was created when he just didn't show up for the GSP press conference and sort of forced Dana's hand. And I don't think it's extrapolating too much to say that might be behind why they didn't want to go straight to Nick Diaz, because they're not sure what they're getting in terms of a guy who's actually, you know, going to make all of his obligations, and putting him straight into a pay-per-view main event might be more of a risk than Dana's willing to take, whereas I don't get that sense around anybody really besides Nick Diaz, particularly Alistair Overeem. Yeah, it's clear GSP versus Nick Diaz is one of those mega fights that they can do that'll probably do north of 800,000 buys. That's clearly true, and the second they can get there, they will. But I think there is more trepidation with Nick as far as putting him right back into the spotlight than there would be with Overeem.
And Mike, what kind of message are you sending if Overeem gets an immediate title shot?